negativity can be loud, but it's not strong. Even dark energy, darkness, it's very stupid. Like, it is a stupid entity.
And it's scared.
Yeah. When we realize that we're dealing with lower intelligence, when we're stuck in fear, when we're in that darkness, we can always choose to come home. And Divinity said, if you ever call me, I will answer. I don't care what you've done. I don't care who you've become. If you call, I will answer. It's an eternal invitation. Divinity wants us to choose that point of love and connection. That is a truth that vibrates in every single one of my cells, and a message I like to share, that there is nothing that you could do. There is never a moment on this earth that you've gone too far where you can't call on the divine. And the divine will answer. And I like to make sure everyone knows that. So if enough of us could embrace, by doing the shadow work, clearing the space, raising our frequency, and being able to hold this divine intelligence that is rooted in unconditional love and acceptance and peace, we could really change the planet together.
Yeah. Well, hey there, and welcome back to Fire and Soul, the space to deepen your divine alignment and further activate your awakening. And today's guest is exactly that for us and so many around the world. Sophie Frabotta, many of you are already following her account, Awaken with Sophie, and have fallen in love with her and her daughter Claire and their beautiful ceremonies, and the transmissions that come through Sophie are just so beautiful. And it's incredible that I got to sit with her and really drop into what I believe is laying the groundwork for the collective spiritual foundation that is required in order for us to experience that as the gateway to New Earth. And I love how Sophie describes her interpretation of New Earth as a state of consciousness, and it's here, it's now, and it's happening. And so many of us are linking arms vibrationally, virtually, physically, and it's just gorgeous that we're on this path together. And so parts of the weavings of this conversation include topics such as spiritual inclusivity, and Jesus as our master teacher and how that came to be, as well as energetic cord cutting and the hygiene around that. And then, of course, why, I say of course, because this is just like my love language, but why our wounds, our sacred shadows are truly the gateway to our truest and highest purpose, and that will reveal our divine gifts. This conversation gets so rich and deep, especially toward the end, where we talk about how there has been some misunderstandings of even the way in which Sophie shares with her daughter, and that dynamic between the two of them that requires, again, just turning inward and doing some of the deepest inner work of her life. It was an absolute incredible conversation to have, and to be in her presence and to get to share in that sacred reciprocity that felt like a bit of a dance. And it's honest, it's real, and I know you're going to love it. And so let me read you a little bio on her, to honor her and her history and her devotion to truly being of service to us as a steward of New Earth. Sophie Frabotta is a thought leader, healer, author, and trailblazer in the spiritual industry. With a master's degree in transpersonal psychology and a globally recognized spiritual life coach certification, she stands out as a distinguished figure in the realm of spirituality. And what I love about what she's referred to as is the soul whisperer. And she really helps us to hone our own intuition, which is our soul's language. This conversation is so beautiful. I'm excited and proud to share it with you. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Sophie Frabotta. Sophie, my goodness, we were just having a blast behind the scenes, and I was like, let's hit record. Let's just drop right in. It's so wonderful to have you on Fire and Soul. Welcome.
Thank you. I already have like full body chills.
Me too.
I'm so excited to be here.
I feel like, yeah, our celestial courts, our angels and our guides, they were in cahoots to make this happen, because it was very synchronistic, synchrodestined for us to have this moment, because I've been following Awaken with Sophie on Instagram. That's how I originally came across your work. And obviously just deeply moved by everything that you share on your own as a beautiful spiritual life coach with your daughter, Claire, just getting to witness the evolution of your own journey. In the ways in which you clean from such, I think, a spiritually hygienic pure-hearted place. I just want to take a moment to truly honor you and the 10,000 hours plus of one-on-one spiritual client work and your journey of how you got to this moment, which we're going to drop into deeply today. But thank you for the work that you do, the real deep inner work, and that you get to share sort of the outcome energetically, vibrationally with us. But it's a beautiful guidepost for those that are navigating some otherwise pretty interesting, wild times.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm thrilled to be here and dive deep. When I saw some of the stuff that you had posted, I was just like, wow, this is a deep soul. And I love a good deep soul. So I was so happy to connect. And I can tell already our connection is on fire.
Yeah,
so
totally.
yay.
Fire and soul, there it is. Inspired action from an awakening soul. And that's exactly it. You know, it's so interesting. Typically, I love to honor someone's backstory a bit, and we will right out of the gate. But because we were having a discussion around what is spiritual awakening, and that's what you teach in the most beautiful, pristine ways. But I'd love to ask, what is your idea now? Because it evolves, right? Like, what is spiritual awakening? What does that mean for you?
So ultimately, spiritual awakening is when you start to have the consciousness awaken within your body that you are far more than this body and this life. And that wakes up through your senses, through your feelings, and then eventually your thoughts. Yeah. And once you start having those thoughts, you start to question things. You could question, why am I here? What's my purpose? What's that hidden agenda, as we just spoke about too? And you start to wake up and you start to look at things differently. And then what happens is you start to run into your shadows, your blocks, your broken bones, and your bruises that you've either encountered from this life or you've brought in from a past life to heal in this life. And this is the part of the spiritual awakening path, which I call the metamorphosis. That a lot of people stop. When they reach this phase, they kind of dig their heels and they're like, whoa, I'm supposed to feel good. Where are my synchronistic angel numbers? Where are my sparkly crystals? Make this pain go away. But what we want to do is dive in at that point and realize that these are the blocks that are actually blocking your consciousness from elevating. So we do the work, we cleanse, we find the wounds, we deal with the inner child, we deal with karmic debts that we have brought into this body. We face, we journal, we cry, we write, we express, and we eventually clear these wounds, which then creates space. And that's when we enter really the third stage of spiritual awakening, which is the radiance, where you start to actually hold new higher vibrational energy and you become a radiator. You radiate your energy outward and you're not absorbing the collective. So when people get to this phase, a lot of things change, a lot of rules change, a lot of, things that you needed in the lower vibrational states, like the 10 commandments, right? Like you don't need the 10 commandments because you would never use your energy for harm. It wouldn't even cross your mind. So you break out of these thresholds and you break out of these awarenesses and you start to live in what we call the new earth, which is a fifth dimensional frequency, and it operates in a different way. And that's where we're going. That's the point of the awakening, is to lead us all into this new earth, this higher vibrational expression of consciousness on this planet Earth right now.
Yeah, beautifully said. Wow, thank you. The evolution of human consciousness. And what does that mean also for the human body, right? This physical vessel that does its very best to hold the truth and totality of who and what we really are. It's humbling and it's beautiful. And so you mentioned something that would be a beautiful segue into a little bit of your backstory, anything that you feel called to share of the 10 commandments. You realize you don't need that. I would say, yeah, I don't want to use the word crux because it's a perfect place for anyone on their path of just, this is what brings me comfort. And so I, like you, spiritual inclusivity, no judgment on anyone, but you're right. We become it. We are it. I think we remember, right? But this actually ties in nicely to you and going to a Christian college and a kind of a more Christian upbringing. And then you had a switch I believe, during college in a moment where your mother came in, and it was a beautiful backstory, but I don't want to steal your thunder. Like anything that would help to bring you to this moment. And I know you know how to share this in a way that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the reason I'm so dedicated to the light is because I was stuck in darkness. I know how darkness operates. I know what it feels like. I know the traps. I know the loops. I know the booby traps that are hidden in the darkness. And I almost committed suicide in that place. So when I talk about holding the light and going to these higher places, it is coming from having experience in the basement, so to speak. And when I finally started to get my connection back with God, it was through Jesus, who I have a very, very beautiful relationship with, and then ended up going to a Christian college for my undergrad. And it was there that I really was exposed to what I didn't want to be. Because I had this, Jesus pulled me out of the darkness moment that saved my life. And a lot of the people around me were just taught about Jesus. They hadn't experienced Jesus. And so then I was condemned because I liked chakras and I liked the crystals. And I had this experience with Jesus and I didn't know we judged. And there were things that you couldn't do and all the rules and the laws. And I was like, I don't fit in here. Because I believe if however God touches your heart, whatever language is used for God to touch your heart is your personal business and truth. And I am just here to celebrate the fact that you are connected. And so when I was judged, it really changed. I do not call myself a Christian. I do have a very strong relationship with what I call Jesus, the healer, and the highest vibrational guide any of us could reach out to. But I don't buy into the way that the conservative Christian communities operate and the vibrations and frequencies that they send to their populations. That's not in alignment with me. Again, I have no judgment. If that's where people feel like they are getting their connection, amen, go to church, praise and worship, do your thing. However, on the same page, if that is through Judaism or Buddhism or one being a Muslim, like, I don't care. I don't care what you call yourself. I care what your connection is. And I care about bringing the light into the darkness. And I believe that is ultimately what Jesus did. Jesus was the light that shined in the darkness. And all we need is a pinhole of light to make a huge impact in a dark room. So
that just deserved a nice pause. We say things, and sometimes we're fast, and you weren't. That deserves a pause, because we're in some serious times, and there is so much good. Everyone I know is going through something really intense right now. Shadows are up, but also the purest, most unbridled joy is up and available. And it's like, yeah, this is how it works. You want to embody the light to the totality of which you have awaiting you, then also dive deeply into your shadows, because those are the sacred wounds that reveal your greatest gifts. This is the work that I'm heavily devoted to, deeply devoted to is what I would say. But it's so awesome what you just said about Jesus, because back in last summer, I was heading to a river trip by car up in Sacramento. And at the time I was living in LA, so it's going to be about 9 hours each way. And I had just heard about this book called Resurrecting Jesus by Adyashanti. Maybe you've come across it. Adyashanti is a beautiful awakening teacher, really embodied Zen Buddhist master. And he's not religious whatsoever at all. And he really has given his mystical interpretation about the first four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And you cannot listen to this audio, which is about 18 hours. So I got it up and down that river trip last summer without fully identifying with Jesus, the human, the beloved being, right? This bringer of light. And it really knocked my socks off, to say the least. And that's when I knew that Jesus was my teacher in this life too. And then the formation, his image, or how we project, would show up in my amber salt lamp in the cloud. I was like, got it, very clear. And then 222 started showing up. And that for me feels very much like my partnership with Jesus, this beautiful sacred union. But I wanted to offer one thing, because Jesus is incredible and it leads to something. So thank you for your patience on this. In February, I was doing this really profound breathwork class, and it was like a 4-hour journey. It was this whole thing. And in it, my body was just somatic releasing some deep, deep, dense old fears. And I literally heard myself gasp for air saying, do I get a future? So it was that part of me that had heard about all the stuff, done a lot of work to alchemize that, to be in the world, but not of it kind of thing. And I gasped, and then Jesus appeared literally like he was in my living room. And so ever since then, I literally vet every decision, collaboration, everything through this beautiful being known as Jesus. And so I think that what this time really represents, this great awakening, the spiritual awakening that many of us are experiencing, certainly noticing amongst others, that's Christ consciousness in its purest form, moving from the lower 3 chakras up into the heart, right? Forgiveness and understanding and oneness. But I'd be curious as to, does any of that resonate for you around the Christ consciousness and what it's meant to be? You're nodding. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that, Christ consciousness is the 5th dimensional template, right? It's an operating off of an unconditional love frequency that emits from the heart. And it is so safe to be there. Yeah. And so when we have wounds like the abandonment wound or the betrayal wound or the unsafety wound or the unlovable wound, what we are doing is we are vibrationally keeping ourselves out of that consciousness. And that's why we do the work to heal those deeper wounds so that we can rise up back into safety, which is where we then plug into this ultimate unconditional love frequency, which is the connection point, I believe, to Christ consciousness.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, I've heard myself say the deeper that my connection to God and Jesus, and they're very distinctly different for me, and my angels and guides very distinctly different. I'd love to hear your process on that or anything that might be coming up. But it became, I lost my train of thought too. This happens too lately so much. It's like everything's mutating. Is that happening for you ever? It's like, we're going to leave this in. I don't even care because it's real. And I know a lot of people are experiencing this, but yeah. So can you talk about the distinctions? Because I loved your spiritual inclusivity comment, and really it felt like a love letter that you had written on social media very recently, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, I just believe because I was judged so harshly and did not feel that unconditional love and acceptance, I learned what I wanted to be because of that experience. It's like I felt the opposite. And so it really drove me on my path of being really accepting of and inclusive. Like it doesn't matter how you get to God or what you call it. If it's a universe, if it's God, if it's sunshine, if it's Jesus, it doesn't matter. It matters that you connect, that you plug in. And that's where, I feel like one of my big legacies that I want to leave behind on this planet, which will probably be very implanted in 50 years or 100 years, and it won't even be a thought anymore. It's like, how could we have not even had this? But that is laying the spiritual foundation so that we can evolve. And I really believe that when I wrote my theses in my master's program, when I had to define what spirituality was very early on in the game, this was, back in 2014, I defined spirituality as connecting with the earth, plugging into the divine, and having an open heart.
Yeah.
And so that exercise is something that I teach all my students from the very beginning in their prep work. Like, this is something we do every single day. This is something I have done for decades. It's something I continue to do. It restores my energy. It helps me become an emitter, a radiator, rather than an absorber.
Yes.
And it is the foundation that we all need energetically, spiritually, and emotionally to be able to handle these higher frequencies that are coming in.
Beautifully said. You've mentioned quite a bit about doing the work and meeting our shadows and all of that. So I'm curious because we talk about also, you speak a lot about cutting the energetic cords, and that is so essential for a lot of reasons that no longer serve us in many ways, and certainly not a part of the new earth frequency or way of being in the world, which I think is already happening. We're choosing to be it. It's pivotal what's happening, these first waves, right, for the evolution of humanity, really. But when you talk about dissolving or cutting or basically those words, are you also, is that interchangeable for you in your language of integration?
So what I like to start about anytime I talk about cords is that cutting a cord is your last step. It is final. It is like cutting your hair. It's gone. It's gone. And so we don't start there. We don't start with cutting cords. And unfortunately, a lot of people do. That's where they start. They learn, oh my gosh, my ex was toxic. Let me cut that cord.
Right.
And then they realize they share a dog together, and now their interactions are unrelatable, and they have to make a more difficult choice. So what I really encourage when it comes to cords is understanding the energetics that flow between us first. And I in one of our courses, it's actually our mentorship, we go through 6 weeks of cord work so that people can understand the real foundation of how we clear cords, alter cords, untangle cords, and then cut cords.
Yes.
There's cutting cords is number 4 on their learning path.
Yeah.
Because when we take a machete to things, they don't necessarily grow back. I have experienced cutting cords with people and never seen them again. And we live in a very similar space. It is wild. It is final. So there's a lot of things that we can do to clear energy before we go to the machete method and just slice away. And that takes awareness, and that takes understanding and learning. And this is what I really am trying to bring into the spiritual community is the intelligent, the emotionally intelligent way to approach some of these invisible methods. People hear about chakras and they think they know everything. And then they're doing chakra clearing and they're actually spiritually bypassing inner child work because of that, right? And so when we understand that all these things that exist in the spiritual world have a background and have a real way that you can work with this, and it becomes very real and it changes your life if you pause and take the time to really learn about it before you take a machete to it, so to speak.
Yeah, so good. And I'm so glad that you're speaking to this, because it's very easy to assume, even with probably even some of the content that you put out, if someone's not really following the path or they've worked with you behind the scenes, it could look like there's spiritual bypassing, right? It really could. But when you get into the depths of what you offer, and if one's listening from that lens of perception, they can hear that it's like you're fully embodied, met the deepest parts of your shadow, not to mention the old days of 20 years ago, and having to face off with an exit point that you were offered. And it was like, wait, that's just a pattern that was seeking suicide. It wasn't me. It wasn't my soul. We've got work to do. And how beautiful. So speaking to that, and because it can sound so sort of nebulous, what would be a couple of ways in which someone can begin to start to get present to their own shadows? Or you've also mentioned like the past life stuff, like Akashic records type of thing, right? You talk about karma and transmuting that into our true dharma. And so whatever it's kind of picking up for you in there, I know there's a question specifically somehow, some way, but like, yeah, what would be a good place that you would recommend that one would start to understand what's running them unconsciously that they can absolutely get free of with devotion?
So the best place to start is by paying attention to what's surfacing right now. Because what's surfacing right now is here to get your attention, to call you within. So I don't even suggest people start with the Akashic records. I would consider that a more advanced path.
Yeah.
And if you don't have your grounding and your connection cord, it could get really scary out there, and you can bump into some energies that don't feel good. And so that's to me not where we start. Where we start is obviously the grounding, the connecting, and the opening of the heart on a daily basis. So then when you get triggered through the day, you get a difficult email, or you have a problem with a family member and you're in a triggered state, You recognize I'm in a triggered state because I have unresolved wounds inside that this is bumping into. But the wounds are mine. This present day situation is only the knock on the door, showing me that I have unresolved issues. And if I can stop and pause long enough to say, I'm a carrier of this energy. My boss isn't, my husband isn't, my child isn't, I am. They're just showing me it's there. Let me then get the support I need to understand how to figure this out. Because a lot of the time, knowing how to do this work is going to take having a guide of some sort, whether that's a coach, whether that's a course, whether that's, renting books from the library. Having a guide show you how to do these steps is what is the next step.
Yeah.
Because without the information, you probably aren't going to go deep enough. And then what happens is people are like, oh, I've been doing this work for 10 years. And all they've been doing is looping in the present day problems. They haven't gotten down to the core wound. And that core wound is what holds the energy. And you pop the energy, you transmute, you alchemize. That's when you can call in new energy, and there's space for it to actually root in.
Beautiful. And my listeners and viewers know that I am a devout student to the Gene Keys. And that's what actually has helped me get the clarity around my core sacred wound. I call it the sacred wound, and the Gene Keys of shadow of self-obsession, but that reveals the gift of naturalness and then up into the essence, the city. That's the way that system works, that living stream of consciousness of being. But what's so cool is that the shadow drove me far unconsciously that I wasn't even aware of, right? Like, it got me on TV. It had me have success. It make a lot of money, more than anyone in my immediate family had ever earned. And so that self-obsession was amazing until I was awakening. And then it was like, oh my gosh, that was so much ego, which was so important at the time. But I can now look back, and then I started to really dive into the divine inner child work, right? And I could see how she needed that for validation and worthiness and all that external source of all of that for me to feel loved and worthy, and that I really mattered in this world. And quite frankly, that was 3 years ago that I woke up to that. 3 years ago. So I'm newer on this path, and it was almost like the shame and the grief that I had to experience, because it wasn't even so much about just me navigating the world through that lens of shadow, but it was also, I was given many life reviews of how others felt around that. My family, my siblings, my friends, my clients. And so then that was like another year of just forgiveness work. It's been a journey. And now I feel really, really good. And I do live in the world where it's heaven on earth pretty much every day. And when the shadow is up and I feel self-obsession, because I have not yet come across the idea that it's gone completely and forever. That's not my path. I love this idea, and perhaps I will get there, or it'll be available to me maybe through this cord cutting that you're talking about. But what I now look at that as is a beautiful teacher. It's a catalyst, so if the shadow of self-obsession starts to show up, and sometimes it will, like on a video on social media, I'm like, I look old, or I look fat, or whatever. And I'm just like, oh, okay, thank you. So now I try to love on that version of me that is just running amok right now, because it used to get to run the show. And so now I get to integrate those thoughts that come up that feel so familiar. They're almost like home, right? And so I love this idea that that's possible to ultimately eliminate and cut. I just haven't quite gotten there yet. So what would you say to someone who's kind of there? Because I have a feeling a lot of our listeners might be on a very similar path of recognizing that it's there to serve us and to grow us and to teach us, maybe for this incarnation, but we don't have to reside there, dwell there, and be engulfed or overwhelmed by it. The shadow reveals the gift, always, the purpose. You've mentioned that, the truest freedom you can ever imagine. But for those who are like, tell me about that part of like, will it always show up? Because that is out there in a lot of teachings these days. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
And what in particular are you saying it's always out there?
Oh, shadow work. Like you're talking about how we can cut it forever and completely. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts of what about those who say, but I thought that was something that serves my journey, not to let it overwhelm me, the shadow, the core sacred wound, which is those words I use interchangeably, and that they are here to evolve and teach and grow me, right? The purpose of my being on this earth at this time. There are people that feel like, oh, that's always going to be there, but it's my relationship with it that shifts everything versus cut it forever, completely done.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a very Western approach. We want to cut it out, right? We find a tumor, we want to cut it out. We don't want to recognize the energy that's flowing towards that space that's disrupted. We just want to cut it, make it go away. We have these eyelids that are hanging to it, cut it, make it go away. Yeah. You know, we have this tendency to not want to face. And so the cutting of cords can become a huge spiritual bypass of not wanting to actually do the work. And the thing is that if you prematurely cut a cord that you still have work around, it's going to come back, and it's going to probably come back worse because it's going to plug into somewhere you're unconscious that you have a weak point. And that can create illness, disruptance in your energetic field that you don't even tie to that person. So, the thing that I say about the shadows and about the work, you know, I am a student of this work myself. I am devoted to this work. I've been doing this work for many decades. This work has saved my life. Yeah. And I still do the work every day. I look at my triggers. I look at what's happening in my energy. I face parts of myself that don't feel good. I'm on social media 6 days a week. We have a pretty relentless posting schedule, but I see this as my ministry. And it's a way that I can touch people around the globe with a little spiritual inspiration. And so we stick to the schedule, and there's a lot of pressure. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I have to look at myself on camera all the time. I have to edit footage. I have to listen to my voice. I have to be faced with myself. And just like you were saying, you know, there's times where I can go into kind of a negative space, but I can see that as a trigger.
Yeah, totally.
And instead of just following the trigger and not posting because I'm activated by this trigger, I can face myself. I can face the shadow and be like, what's coming up? Okay, I'm aging. I'm experiencing this. My voice is changing. My, whatever the insecurity may have been, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that something deeper is getting triggered. And so to thread this back to what we were talking about, this work, people will be like, does this work ever end? And I'm like, it can, right? You can get to a place and say, I'm not doing any more work, but I'm in this lifetime for extra credit. So I have made an open invitation to my higher self to continue to grow me and evolve me. And that what happens is the more tools you have, the less amount of time you spend in these triggered spaces.
Yep.
So we have these triggers, they come in, we deal with them, we transmute them, and we return to this even higher vibrational space. Because now that trigger is not activated. So for me, this is a lifelong mission. It's not something that I ever accomplish. It's I'm hiking up this mountain, and I will go until the day I die, and I will collect all the extra credit for my higher self that she wants as I'm trekking that mountain.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I feel exactly the same way. And I know that our listeners and viewers are very much devoted to that path too. I heard you say it as I was prepping and listening to several podcasts that you've guested on. And you were like, you know, it's called Awaken for a reason. It's not a finite destination. And that's very much the love language of this show as well. And so that's an important thing to remember. And like you, like wanting to get the extra credit, for me, with the language that I'll hear myself say is, I just want to be in divine integrity with why I actually came, right? And you said something at the very top of this conversation that I hope wasn't missed, but I'm going to bring it up just in case it might have slipped someone's ear. And that is, eventually, even your thoughts, you will begin to evaluate. And I was like, oh, Sophie, that's where I am. And I've been there for about 9 months now. So it's still a newer journey for me. But whoa, that's like next level, because I have, through the self-obsession, shadow wound, right? And then lots of other things that I've come to this life to work out. There's a theme, and it's so beautifully arced, right? And curated, really. But I just noticed that, like, a lot of that can be really, it can be hard to see. It can be hard to be with. But eventually it's like, I just want to rest my head, or at the end of this particular incarnation, and be in alignment and integrity with those who are observing this with love and unconditional acceptance, but still it's like, I really want to make the most out of this, right? So beginning to examine my thoughts, I used to hyper vigilantly look at my thoughts, and now it's just like allowing for that compassion and grace and love and light, like the God gaze, right? Like, well, how would I be seen from that point of view, instead of just shaming myself even more, which is an old habit and pattern, right? So I'd be curious to hear, like anything that might have come up for you as me saying, sharing that.
Yeah, I love that, the God gaze.
Oh.
I think that's like a very high consciousness way of talking about that concept. What would Jesus do?
Yeah.
Or how would Jesus see me? Right. I love that. It's very beautiful. And it really gets us into the fiber of unconditional love. Because when I bring anything to God, I am received with such a safe place to fall and then be wrapped in this blanket of love. And so what if enough of us on this planet really started to allow that divine consciousness to come through into the earth? Like, there is such a thing of critical mass. Like, why do some monkeys start doing something on one island and then the other monkeys of a different species are picking up that same behavior? It's consciousness, right? So if enough of us could embrace, by doing the shadow work, clearing the space, raising our frequency, and being able to hold this divine intelligence that is rooted in unconditional love and acceptance and peace, we could really change the planet together.
Yeah. What I love so much about this message is that at the deepest parts of my being, my highest prayer is exactly what you just said, for all beings, right? And I recognize that not all are going to hear that call, right? But I do believe in like the 100th monkey sort of concept that you just, not even a concept, it's real. Totally believe in that as well. And I do believe that the critical mass might not even have to do with quotient or quality. It's depth of quality, right? Did I say quantity or quality a moment ago? I was trying to get to the depth of the quality of that awareness and consciousness. That is more important than how many. Are you in agreement on that?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Because it's very much like the math of vibration. Like, a positive vibration is 100 times more powerful than a negative one.
Yes. Yes.
Right. But that saying, a lie can make its way around the world before the truth can get on its shoes.
Totally.
Right. So negativity can be loud, but it's not strong. The love, the positivity, even dark energy, darkness, it's very stupid. Like, it is a stupid entity.
Stupid. And it's scared.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then it's when we realize that we're dealing with lower intelligence, when we're stuck in fear, when we're in that darkness, and that we have this opportunity and this choice point that divinity itself has given us to have free will, but we can always choose to come home. And divinity said, if you ever call me, I will answer. I don't care what you've done. I don't care who you've become. If you call, I will answer. And that goes for the entirety of this life and beyond. Even in your beyond, if you're stuck in a wormhole or a portal and you call towards the light, you can still go.
Absolutely.
It's an eternal invitation. Divinity wants us to choose that point of love and connection. I think I'm not really sure why we have that whole system in play. I'm sure there's a big reason behind the scenes of our souls that does. But I do feel that is a truth that vibrates in every single one of my cells, and a message I like to share, that there is nothing that you could do. There is no one you could be. There is never a moment on this earth that you've gone too far where you can't call on the divine, and the divine will answer. Like, it's an open invitation. And I like to make sure everyone knows that, and it's hard to share this in kind of a social media platform, because you can have people come out and it turns into something it wasn't intended for. So when it comes to these messages, I love sharing them in this kind of sacred, safe space with someone like you who totally receives it and holds the space. And I feel like then that message can really reverberate into your audience, into my audience, into the homes and the lives and the ears of those that need to remember this. So.
Preach, sister, preach. Yeah. And this is your audience. I mean, we're on this path, and, we're on a path of a lot of different layers of awakening, right? And I mean, it's wild out there, but what I'm learning is that where I tune my focus, my attention, that is what grows. And so I could focus on all of the trauma, all the shadow, and all of that. And I did. It was actually a very important part of my path. And so where I am now is more of like, all right, we've done the deep inner work. We've faced the shadows. We will continue to. We know its frequency, literally by tone, right? We're like, yep, it wants to rumble up. There is a catalyst, trigger catalyst. This is an opportunity. I love Rumi's. One of my favorite quotes that Rumi's ever said, he's my favorite poet, is, as you live deeper and deeper into the heart, the mirror gets cleaner and clearer. And what I love about that is that it provides for so much grace and compassion and understanding of like, yeah, but our triggers are going to come up, and those are activations, they're catalysts. Just integrate them and reutilize that fuel once you've really gone all the way in to assist you on your journey that will be of the light, right? Because that's what it is. It's a transmutation. And so for me to not be afraid to even face off with anything has become so important. Like, I can handle anything within, without, above, below, like, bring it on, right? And then when we join hands, arms, we link vibrationally or physically, if we have that privilege, it's like, it is a compounding effect. And that is what I see happening. And so that is what I love about this conversation, is being a spiritual foundation for New Earth. And New Earth has a lot of different interpretations. What is yours?
So my interpretation of the New Earth is that it's not a place we go. It's a consciousness we enter. And when we enter that higher vibrational consciousness, Christ consciousness, unconditional love consciousness, we begin to really experience this new portal of existence. And so because you haven't gone anywhere different, there is still the same things happening. And like, here's an example. If there's a car accident and you have 4 bystanders on different corners, you're going to have 4 different stories. And that's because people have different experience. They have a different consciousness. They had a different angle. They have a different perspective.
Yes.
What happens in the New Earth is you start to have this different angle, this different perspective. So you don't necessarily see the same things that maybe somebody in the 3rd dimension is focused on. You don't even see it. Your attention's not even gravitated to it, which means that you can hold different space and help lift ultimately the collective, I believe. So a lot of those that are entering this consciousness are here to help stabilize that foundation and lift the vibration overall, so that when the masses, because we are waking up at a pretty rapid rate, and when the masses begin to kind of crack their eyes and, that have been resistant and fighting and so outwardly focused and hating all the world and the politics and all the stuff, when they start to crack their eyes and wake up and realize they are the holder of their own answers, that lies within them doing their own inner work to clear the pathway, the threshold to entering the New Earth is already established for them because of those that came before. So it's very much like electricity. Electricity is brought into neighborhoods. And then if you have a plot of land, you already have an electrical outlet you just need to plug into. However, if you go to a space that has no development, you have to bring everything in. You have to bring in the electricity, the plumbing. That's what we are doing as the New Earth leaders. We are bringing in that vortex, that system right now. And that's been happening probably since 1970. It's been happening for a while. It just hasn't been happening in large numbers. So those that have already found the land and they've dug trenches and they're holding this consciousness and they're clearing collective energies. They're really the foundational pioneers of the new earth. And now you have teachers like me who are doing the work, and I've been doing the work for over 25 years deeply. And I feel like I'm just starting to become what I call is your 5D template is stabilized. I'm just starting to have a stabilized template in the past couple years. It's not like I've been in this new earth space for 10 years.
Right.
It's, maybe 3, maybe 4, at this point. So, it's just really cool. And that's how I would describe it at this point.
Yeah. And it is cool, actually. And I, like you, I feel like I'm getting my footing too, thanks to the Gene Keys. That's what's been helping me. And I know you have a really powerful methodology as well. And everything that you're sharing here resonates. I mean, so deeply. We were talking about something as it feels like we're going to round out the conversation shortly. Before we hit record, I was asking you, what are you picking up? We're recording, let's see, real time, August 22nd. So I'm pretty sure we're going to release close to this date. So right on the pulse of what's happening, we just went through a really big Lionsgate portal. We then had the full moon in Aquarius. There's just a lot going on energetically, cosmically, astrologically, all the things, right? And then we have a real awakening that is truly happening for those that can be with it and ride those waves, which are incredible. But I asked, what's your community saying? What are they navigating? Where are they struggling? And I loved your answer. And then I was like, and where are you? And it was so similar to mine. It was just like, I'm not going to just, yeah. What were you offering? Because I think it speaks to, oh, I'm not alone, right? Because yeah, if you can pick up where I'm leaving off.
Yeah. So I think originally when you asked me that question, I thought this is so funny because I always have an answer for this. I will see themes when I'm working with people, like themes of, oh, it's all about like the mother wound this week, or it's all about dealing with like deeper hidden addictions. And I'll see these themes come up in people's work. And I was just saying to myself this morning, oh, it's so funny. I feel like people are all over the place. People are doing all sorts of different work. And I feel like this is actually representative of the shift that's happening, that there's so much moving underneath the surface. And there's such a huge opportunity right now to face our shadows that spirit, our higher self and our spirit team is just like, let's dive in. Let's just get them to face what is surfacing. They are waking up. Let's use the light and point it on wherever they'll look. So I've seen a lot of different things happening with people right now, from, crystal jewelry breaking off their body to people really uncovering some abuse wounds that they always had a feeling about. And now they know, even though there's no one in their world that will validate it. They are the only ones who can validate it, and they have to work through that pain and that darkness and facing it now. All the way to people, changing their patterns, like morning routines, or all of a sudden they were a vegetarian and they're feeling called to eat meat again. From people that used to eat meat and now are going vegan. I mean, that's what I mean. Inclusivity, there is no judgment. I call myself a flexitarian because I allow my body, my mind, and my soul to guide me where I go. And I want to stay flexible with that and not lock myself into a way of living that may not always be the best way for me. So I think that the biggest thing for you as the listener is to pay attention to what's coming up for you, not your friend, not the collective, but you. What is surfacing and what does it feel like? If you can just answer that question. Okay, so I got triggered by my fill in the blank and it made me feel what? Rejected, betrayed? No, it made me feel sad. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper. What made you feel sad about that? Where do you feel it in your body? What does that sadness feel like? You want to go deep in and find the frequency, because if you find the frequency, you can get closer to finding where that frequency is living. And then you can do the deeper work with a guide or teacher on transmuting that frequency. And that's ultimately our technique that we call cellular alchemy, which we teach about in our upcoming book. Which we don't have any information on that yet, but it is coming one day soon. So anyways, it's a technique that shows you how to get down to the frequency point and then how to transmute that energy. And that's where we get these breakthroughs.
And what's that called? Cellular what?
Cellular Alchemy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So good. Is that going to be the title of the book?
No.
Oh, okay. I was like, yeah. Ooh, so good though. So that reminds me of, I don't even know if I've ever shared this, but it feels like it's important because you just described a beautiful arc of true inner transformation, right? And real awakening. And that is, one night I remember being beckoned to the altar. I have a personal sacred altar, and I know you do as well. And it was like 1:00 in the morning. Like, why? I felt like I was good, like relationships, work, like health. Like, I was like, everything is not always feeling so in flow, but like, I was like, everything is good. Why am I being called to the altar? But I don't second guess. I'm a very devoted listener. Go to the altar, get it all going with the smokes and the lights and the candles and all of that. And I'm just sitting there for about 20 minutes in the wee hours of the morning. I go to sleep at 9. And all of a sudden, like the hidden, most tiniest tuck of this little thread of a frequency, like exactly what you just described. And it was like, what is that? And got curious. And then it was in my mind, but it was like pulling on it, right? And it was like a long, like pulling a little thing on a sweater, and you find out it's got this huge yarn behind it. And it was showing me how deeply embedded anxiety was. And how that anxiety, that feeling tone of anxiety, this is like 2 years ago now, was running everything in my life. How I drove on the traffic or in the freeway, how I ate my food, how I walked, how I expressed myself in the cadence of my tone. It was like a rushed energy, right? And then I was actually taken to the root beneath that, which is to begin to recognize where that started to show up. And it was in the womb. I mean, this is like ancient stuff. And then I was able to, what I believe is to heal several lines of my ancestors, and they will say it too, but that level of awareness, it's not available right in the beginning. The mind is so accustomed to being busy and noisy and loud and distracted, right? And so the real, I would like to offer the opportunity here is just to learn to get present, just to slow it down and to get still and to maybe begin to notice what we are absorbing. That was huge for me. I was a TV watcher. I'm not going to share about politics anymore because it doesn't even interest me, but like I had one side that I was devoted to, and it's like, all of that. And it was like, oh, how is that impacting this root of anxiety, right? Like all of what I'm absorbing, it's so powerful when we start to just look at our life from that point of view and clean some of that up. And then we can allow for a still point and then connection with the divine. Yeah. Yeah. You're nodding. Yeah, totally.
Beautiful.
Yes. Is there a spiritual practice or a meditation or anything that you feel called to share that maybe is coming up for you? I don't know, we're talking a lot about shadow, sacred wounds, energetic hygiene, spiritual awakening, cutting.
Yeah, I have a whole page that I made for people to begin this work. It's free. It's 33 free meditations. There are different playlists that like self-love and starting your day and cutting cords and chakra work. They're all anywhere from 5 to 12 minutes. They're super short, super easy. People tend to love it. And I've always had this on my website, always. From the time I began, I started my business back in 2006. And so I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meditations. So this is just a little snippet of what we have. And in our courses, they're usually a little bit longer. All of these ones I have on this page are recorded live in live meetings and stuff that I've just turned into ways to serve others. So I would love to share that link with you guys. And, if anyone wants to begin meditating, going within and starting to learn about this is a free resource that I'd be happy to
Absolutely.
share.
What is that link? And then we'll put it in the show notes.
I think it is awakencollective.com/meditate with Sophie, meditate-with-Sophie. But I can send it to you.
Okay, beautiful. And I will make sure that it's in the show notes too. Before we officially wrap, is there anything that you wish you'd been asked or that you would like to share? And then I want to maybe preface that with, and I might know the answer, but what's been like a really profound spiritual teacher for you in this life, or maybe a few? Yeah. And
Oh,
anything you would
easy.
ask that you'd like to share. Yeah, I know. I know where you're going to
I mean, I feel very, very fulfilled and satisfied with this conversation. I feel like it's just so juicy from so many angles. So I don't really have anything else that I need to say. But in terms of spiritual teachers that I have absolutely adored on this path, Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, Michael Beckwith,
Oh,
Iyanla Vanzant are some of my favorite people that have been huge inspiration to me. And I absolutely adore them. You know, I know Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer are in spirit now, but Michael Beckwith and Iyanla are still on the planet, marching and doing their work. Iyanla Vanzant is really the reason I became a coach in the first place. I used to watch her show on is called Starting Over in 2003 on NBC.
remember.
2003.
Yep.
I watched every episode. I did everything she said to do with everyone. And my life was like changed in 6 months. And I was like, I used to like joke around and be like, I need to call on my inner Iyanla right now. And then she became big with Oprah and, and now she has her own show, Iyanla Fix My Life and that whole thing. But her books that she wrote, One Day My Soul Just Opened Up. Amazing, amazing book. If you don't know where to start, get that book and start on her 40-day journey. Your life will start to open. Love her.
I love that you brought that up. I was not aware that you followed her work, and I just feel called to share it with you as like a fellow sister on this path. But Reverend Michael Beckwith was my spiritual teacher for 18 years at Agape. I got a non-accredited whole degree at the Agape University. I ran 2 of his spiritual ministries for years and years and years, the Beckwith Speaker Series and the Conscious Wealth Ministry. And that's how I came across Iyanla Vanzant. I mean, originally, of course, I'd seen her on the Oprah show way back, and Oprah show changed my life. It taught me about gratitude and abundance and all of that. But when Reverend Michael brought Iyanla in to be a guest speaker for one of their annual like holiday events that, of course, I would always go to, I was like, who dis? I mean, she opened me up with humor, with depth, with tears, just I am so grateful that you brought her up because it's been a minute since I've checked out her work. And I definitely want to circle back because I think it's important to go back and to honor those that were there for us and help us to awaken. Because Reverend Michael, I didn't even know New Thought or, Church of Religious Science. I didn't know that that was even a thing and completely changed my life, And so deep honor to all the people. I love all of them. And that new age spiritual community is, God, it was the foundation for where I feel I am today as well. So thank you for that honoring. Beautiful. So good.
Yeah.
Where can we learn more about your beautiful work for those who want to connect with you the easiest? Aside from the link.
So awakenwithsophie.com is one of our main websites. And then from there, you can get to everything we do. Okay. So that is our hub. We do have a lot of different websites, but you can get anywhere from there. So that's the best place to go.
Okay, beautiful. So we'll make sure we link that and your social handles because I imagine most of my audience is very familiar with you, but for those who aren't, I don't know where you've been, but it's beautiful. And I also just want to give an honoring to your daughter, Claire. I've heard you speak about that relationship and how truly karmic, dharmic it is. And it's beautiful to see the both of you doing what you need to do to be in service for why you're here and stewards of the new earth. And so I just want to also honor Claire and your courage and your trust of sharing her with us in the ways that you do that are so integrity filled. And just really want to take a moment to honor that beautiful relationship as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think I find it very important, to emphasize that a lot of people are like, oh, mom goals. And, they have this certain perception. And I just like to point out the reason we do these ceremonies is because we have a lot of stuff we're working out together. And it is not all rainbows and butterflies in her home. And she is one spicy soul, and so am I. And we are learning how to work out some of our stuff. And that's where these little rituals and ceremonies come in. While they might look beautiful after they're edited and posted, they're there for a reason. And it's not to look pretty. I know that it comes across that way, but we are working out some deeper stuff.
Yeah. And that's what I pick up when you share those videos. It feels very much like a let me be as transparent as I can for those who can really see this for what it is trying to be, for those who can. But then I also heard you on a few podcasts talk about that so openly and honestly. And I just thought, that is a huge piece that needs to be woven into my conversation with you. It's not the main focal point by any means, but it's important because I think a lot of people, especially now, okay, I thought we were really ending, but just the last couple of minutes feels important. It's in the field. They look at accounts like yours. They look at a spiritual business like mine and both of us and others, right? Like, oh, I just want that. And it's like, wait, you don't get that unless you go all the way in, right? And those relational dynamics, those are our greatest catalyst. And these soul contracts that we make, like the deepest healing and then ultimate freedom of my life was my sacred womb with my father, this beautiful, pristine soul that agreed to play the role in which he's playing perfectly, that has been the highest trigger of my life. But ultimately, about a year ago, I was like, oh, that was all my stuff. You're doing your job perfectly, right? And so now I get to let him off the hook. We get to experience way more heaven on earth, not always, still comes up. But now I know what to do about that because I know what's mine, right? Mm-hmm. And so I share all that because for anyone out there who still thinks that you can just bypass that away, it's like, it's just not sustainable. So if you really want that depth of, I don't know, the mud that the lotus brings, then this is the beautiful work right here that shows up in the rainbows and mala beads and Palo Santo, smoking. And there's a way deeper texture that is trying to emerge. And that's what I really want to honor you on, not just your videos with her and those beautiful ceremonies, but all the work that you do. Thank you for being a beautiful steward of New Earth, Sophie.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for calling that out because I do get some criticism for the spiritual tools that I use and the color of my hair and the color of my eyes and how I shouldn't be doing certain things because of that. And I love that you see the depth and the texture that exists behind that, because in order to get on camera and present takes a lot of clearing. It took a lot of clearing for me, and it continues to take a lot of clearing. So I love that. I love you calling it depth and texture. I'm running with that one. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's like we gave it some context and then we kind of got familiar with the threads and the textures that we're really wanting to be spoken to. And you actually just hit something that's even deeper. And it's, do you know what happens and what I clear in order to show up? And I didn't get the reference though, but I think I did around blonde hair and blue eyes. Are you talking about just the way that God painted you and like what you look like? And what do you mean by that? Because I didn't pick that up. But I think
there's judgment that comes my direction.
With what you look like?
Yes, for some of the spiritual tools that I use.
The light hair and the light eyes, how does that land for people that's misconstrued?
Well, like for instance, if I had dreads, I might be judged by certain communities for certain things.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. So there is that happens behind the scenes as well, which I don't know. I feel like we are always looking at a mirror and we're always seeing what is in us when we look at others. And so if somebody says, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful, they are feeling beautiful and they're sharing their beauty with you through your name. That's all that is. The same is true for criticism, right? And so to know that the depth and texture also comes across is really lovely to see.
Oh, I hear you now, because this is actually why we, on a personal level, why we were supposed to connect. And I'm so grateful that we connected, and I've been following your work for years, but I mean like on a personal soul reunion level, because that's what this is. Sister, you got another one on the path. I that has been, and then with the sacred wound of self-obsession and then getting older and wanting to be at total peace of I'm actually in a really interesting place of my life of I don't necessarily want to be out and public facing. I want to be more of the divine mother, energetic doula behind the scenes. And there is a disconnect and a gap right there right now because I haven't created that, but I know I'm being pulled on that path. But I look at myself and I'm not an unattractive woman. It is what it is. You know, I was given this, and then I'm a Libra rising. Like, I love beauty and I love elegance, and I do. And it's a gift, you know, to really allow ourselves to be with that. And so it has brought up so many of my own triggers as well that I continue to clear in so many different ways of, will it be taken seriously if I wear makeup? If I actually put an iron or curling in my hair, am I like now no longer in integrity and I'm fully embodied? Like, oh, because some of the people that I follow, they say these things. And what I've come to realize is that's their wound.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I love that we're opening this up at the very, very end of a new end, because I do believe there is some beautiful medicine here. And I'll say this, one of my dearest friends, and I won't say her name because she likes to remain fairly anonymous at this point in her life. She's a medicine woman. And she's in her 60s and she's stunning. But we had dinner last night and she was literally like tears in her eyes, like, I know I have deep medicine to serve. And she has a very successful intuitive guidance business, but she's like, I don't want to be online anymore. I don't want to be seen, but yet I need to be seen. And so this huge, because it's this, what we're talking about. So there's something here, maybe another conversation for another time with you, Sophie, of this alchemy of aging with honor and gracefully, and still wanting to just do our hair and wear the earrings and all the jewelry, and to know who we really are and to share that fully embodied and let everyone else just deal with their stuff. But yes, it comes through.
Yeah.
But there's deeper medicine here. Can you feel that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like what it comes down to is when you are in resonance with self and you carry truth in all of your cells, which is an open fifth chakra, right? That is the biggest sign that you have an open fifth chakra. You can self-express. And if that means that you love eyeliner and mascara, you rock that mascara. If it means you love wearing crystals, head to toe, you rock your crystals no matter where you go. So I have found that, you know, the larger my platform has grown, there's also, when I put out a message that is challenging, the amount of stuff that comes back in is something that I try to navigate with grace. Mm-hmm. And I may not respond to some of the nasty comments, but I read them. And I can also learn, right? I can say, that's interesting that they're judging me for having Palo Santo in a reel, or they're judging me for,
that was one of my favorite reels. I don't read the comments. If I read comments, I will, I don't want to be swayed or even attempted. I'm just like, I know what I felt. So I'm going to make my own comment or have my own experience, right? The comments, I feel like reading those and getting absorbed, whether we are online as a creator or we're simply voyeur, right? Be mindful of reading the comments and just notice it through your own discernment. Does that sway your truth or validate your opinion that could be egoically driven, fear-based, right? So there's something to be said for the comment section.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. Yeah, there was one comment that was left that was very long. I read it and it did touch something in me. And so I checked that part of my ego, which I can't even remember right now. Like, I couldn't even give you details. And I did some inner work on it. And I went back to go try and find it, and they had deleted it.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh, work is done.
That's a real cord cutting right there.
Yeah, it was gone. I was like, oh, okay. I guess I resolved that. And that's the thing too about looping it back to doing the inner work. If information and messages come through you and you have that wherewithal to say, if this is touching something in me, I need to look at it. It's mine. It's not them. It's mine.
That's right.
And I can clear it. And then once I do, things disappear like that, literally. When you do the work and transmute and alchemize, the physical reality reflects that back to you.
Oh, so beautifully said. Yeah. And it works in a lot of different ways too. And so we have a lot of coaches and guides and healers and Beautiful, beautiful stewards that tune into this show. And the one thing I wanted to share on that is also be mindful of doing our own inner work so that when someone that we're working with, a client, a student, et cetera, is triggered and then might reach out and voice that, which is to celebrate, oh, you shared your truth, right? So I love that. But then also like, ooh, am I going to behave or respond from a place that's in my trigger or an old codependent wound of, I want you to like me. I still want you to work with me or invest with me or whatever. Oh, no, I would rather be clean and own whatever is alive and authentic for me versus enabling an old trigger of theirs, of mine, et cetera. So this work is so deep and it's so holistic. And when we really are willing to go in and get honest about what that means, because it's not like while drinking multiple glasses of wine, I'm just going to put that out there because I know we got y'all listening, love you, but maybe it's time to just choose another pathway of entry, right? That's a little more sincere. I say that with all the love in the world because I did it until I didn't as well. But there's just a lot of ways in which to look at this. And then, of course, the benefits, just again, to be in that divine integrity and return to wholeness. So we have gone so many different directions. I am so grateful for a most divine, juicy, holy conversation. So thank you so much, Sophie, for giving us your full heart and presence. It means a lot.
Yes, I've loved every minute. Thank you for opening up your space and allowing me to come in.
You are most welcome.